I, Tentus now Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue our discussion on Spelljammer. I've been introducing you to some of the concepts, information that you would need to, and some of just the basics in general of running an adventure in this campaign setting. And I am not quite going to give everything about updating it to the more modern systems, just a little bit of information that might help you along the way. But we were talking about getting your people from the ground into space. Now let's talk about the kind of adventures you're going to have in space, because there is a wide variety and vast difference between them. The first one is just an adventure in space. This is the I'm wandering around hoping something happens, and wandering till I encounter something type of adventure. This is a lot of set pieces, and your characters won't have an exact direction that they're going to be going. They'll get an idea. Let's go over that way. They'll go over that way. You'll throw something together that they're going to encounter over there. You're going to continue that over and over again. It's the most interesting, but least plot-wise of the adventure types you could have. Because you're going to have these interesting sort of set pieces, interesting things going on to your characters, but this is not really the type that gets into huge plots on the adventure. There's the transportation adventure, where your characters, their job, and their ship's job is to get something from point A to point B, and get it there successfully. It could be a person, it could be something small, it could be something valuable, it could be some kind of cargo, whatever the reasons that they're transporting it. It's the adventure of going there and the things they'll encounter along the way that make it something to do. Or you could have a series of transportations that they will, be taking things to different places. No, I'm there now. Oh, they have something else for me to take somewhere else. And it's the adventures of traveling between these places. You could then also be a pirate or a buccaneer or a swashbuckler. They're all effectively the same thing. You go around, take stuff from other ships, prey on them to get materials that you can use to pay for yourself, or pay for whichever you're doing to keep yourself going in space. You're a pirate, a space pirate. Now there is an extension of being a space pirate, space privateer. Privateers are effectively pirates, but they work for a certain nation. They're sanctioned pirates that believe in their own nation or whatever nation pays for them, and they do things that support them, usually preying on an enemy nation or enemy group, more so than anybody that might be connected to their own home. Now there can be a military or a navy game. Now this is not very fun when you're having kind of peace times. You're not doing anything. You are involved in a military. But as soon as a war starts, because wars in space happen a lot. Nations go to battle with each other very often. So if your characters are involved, whether directly or indirectly with a military or a navy, then them getting into combat, into the depths of war, could be a storyline that you would have. It happens more often enough that you characters could definitely get involved in that. Then there's exploration as an idea, that they're going to new places, new planets, new spheres, new realms, just to explore them upon their ship, going in that direction and just keep on going and seeing what we find. Travel that way, go to different spheres, learn things there, explore, discover, record. The last one I do want to mention as an adventure type you can have is intrigue. Now you're saying, intrigue, space game. That might make sense for a land-based game, but how does it work instead of a ground-based game doing it in space? Well, it can still work, because the intrigue, it revolves around the fact that there's a lot of not only nations, but organizations vying for control and power in various places in space. Direct military conflict can occur, and then you get sort of into the military side of things, but there's oftentimes a lot of spies and subterfuge and deception involved in sort of scouting each other out, finding out different things from each other that can draw that your characters could be behind that they could be hired to perhaps spy on someone, or to scout something out, or to infiltrate some other group. And there you go. You've got your intrigue, and a very interesting take on things. Now let's move on from talking about the basic adventures to some of the things you're going to find when you're adventuring. Monsters and other creatures, other races too. Because to keep things usually simple, a lot of the same races or creatures are probably going to be found on different planets. You're going to go to a planet, but familiar sights will be there. You don't have to go around and, as the DM, make a whole huge list of monsters and alien creatures that would be on a planet. You can keep it simple. You keep things that look or are similar to those things. Now, there are effectively 4 types of planets. I'll get into a little more detail about those types of planets. but each of them is based upon the different elements: fire, earth, water, air. Monsters or creatures on these planets reflect that. If it's an Earth planet, that's the most variety. Earth planet would be like our planet. Most world settings that are also planets in Spelljammer, such as Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, they're Earth planets. They have normal ground, Earth, they have some water on them, but a lot of creatures and animals live there. Fire worlds would have fire-based creatures. It's a lot of hot, heat, things like Ifrits and salamanders would be there. Water planets would be aquatic things. It's an aquatic world. Probably the entire world might be covered in oceans with very little to any land. So everything there would be aquatic-based. An air-based planet would probably have a lot of flying creatures, things that the ground itself might either be floating in the air if there is any, or there might not be any that anybody could access. You could also find a lot of dragons, air elementals, and other various air-based creatures could exist there on these worlds. Now, when you're visiting these different worlds, you can do things to make them seem different. There's a few different things. First off, appearance. They might look very much similar, but on this planet, maybe their color is black skin instead of yellow skin, something like that. Some cosmetic changes or slight changes in the way the creature looks. Or if you're just using animals, you could have various different animals. You could have that foxes are now the size of bears, and bears are the sizes of foxes. You use these different statistics for them, maybe just change their natural attacks between them, but effectively, bear statistics is now foxes, except with fox the attacks the fox would do. Bear is now fox's statistics, except as the attacks a bear would do. You could do things like that would be very interesting, and it would change things around. And that's where I get into the next part of the statistical changes, because you don't want to change a lot of statistics of creatures, unless you're doing something crazy like changing the size of them. Just taking the creature and doing any kind of changes in it. Reflect changes that would make sense for whatever environment you're building. If there's more gravity there, maybe it's a hardier stock of creature. Maybe it has more strength. If it's arid, maybe it doesn't need water as much. Things like that, that whatever the environment is, these creatures would reflect being adapted to it. Now, when your space-traveling characters are moving into landing on a planet, that's when things start changing. We're no longer in space, we're on a planet. We're returning to a situation that's somewhat normal Dungeons & Dragons. Normal gameplay. Well, there are certain things that you're going to have to take into account to that. The first off is, when you're landing on a planet, unless you are highly familiar with that planet and that world, effectively it's something like you're dropping on Toril, the Forgotten Realms planet. If I'm landing there, most of the places on Toril are defined. If I'm trying to land in Faerun, I can choose a place in Faerun. On the other hand, if I'm just coming to a planet, my DM is going to have designed something for me to land on. The DM, you as the DM, you're going to have to only design what you need to for the planet. You don't have to design the entire planet. You don't have to fill the entire biosphere with all the different creatures. Wherever your players are going to land is what they're going to encounter, and you're going to determine it. Unless there's specific information otherwise, i.e., it's a planet that's already known, then when your people land there, they're not going to land all the way on the other side of the planet. They're going to land where you want them to. And this might seem a little cruel or pushy, but it's really because it's an entire planet. You have to give some kind of restriction to keep it that your players will go along the storyline you want. A good example, which the book talks about, is if you wanted your characters to go to a city like New York, landing from space, and they decide we're going to land over by Istanbul. When the adventure is over in New York, how are they getting there? That's why when you have them land in that New York-like metropolis-type city, not on the other side of the world. Now, once they've landed, they're going to have to probably interact with people. Most ground-types people don't know about space travel, or when they hear about it, they either think you're crazy, or by the time it goes whispers down the line, it will change the story entirely. If there's a giant space battle with different armadas fighting it out, it might end up being a water battle that people talk about when they hear these things, when the stories spread to the land. And there's a lot of technology that doesn't really spread there. Some of it's there. Things like gunpowder exists in Spelljammer. It's pretty common. While other hands on planets like Faerun, it's fairly rare and much more controlled substance. Another thing about this is that most times space-based races, space-based people, they see the ground people as inferior to them because they're in space. They have more knowledge. They have a greater understanding of the universe. And it's got this kind of superiority complex that does permeate a lot of times with the space-based people and races. And then planets only sometimes get caught up in these things because planets are much larger than a lot of these fleets and armadas are. There are things going on that a planet can get involved in. Unfortunately, oftentimes they don't. And that's one of the main reasons that there's this disconnect between them. And a lot of times people that would travel to a planet to get supplies and things like that, they're not going to be talking about where they came from or things like that with people. It's not convenient to. You have to worry about then discussing and teaching things to people that they're probably not going to believe anyway. So there is a definite disconnect between space and ground, especially in attitudes. And ground people, they tend to be deniers. Now let's move on. I do want to start talking about spelljamming ships. Spelljammer. I'm going to give you some basic information about their statistics now. Now, each one will have a name, and then it will tell you who builds this ship, what race builds it, and what race normally uses it. A race that builds it might not be the one that normally uses it. Sometimes it is. Sometimes there are races that typically use a ship that it might be X race built, like humans built it. Humans and another race might normally use this ship. Now, a ship will have a tonnage. Tonnage is effectively how much it weighs, but it also provides you different information. The amount of tonnage a ship has tells you how many hull points it has, and it tells you how much passengers and crew total the ship can carry. The more tonnage it is, the more people it can carry. I'll talk about the formulas for that in a little while, but for now just know that tonnage is a way of showing the amount of these information. Now the hull points, that's the amount of damage your ship can take before it breaks apart. Effectively, it's the overall hit points of the ship, not a section of the ship, the entire ship. Now crew is actually one or two numbers. If it's a single number, it just means it's X people. The ship needs that X people to carry it, and those X people are all the ship can carry. Effectively, my ship can carry, let's say, 4 people. It needs those 4 people to pilot it. So the first number really is the amount of crew you need to pilot the ship. The minimum number you need. You could have some more to help out with it in case like other ships, things like that. But the first number, minimum. Second number, that's the total number of crew and passengers the ship can have. So it's the number of people the ship can support very easily. Now, different ships sometimes can have room that they would have had for cargo that could be adapted to things like quarters to have more people in it, but this is average information. Custom ships exist, and we'll get into that much later. Last thing I do want to mention today on the statistics, which I'll finish them up more next time, maneuverability. Maneuverability is how easy your ship turns or does maneuvers, how quick it can be to do this, how quickly it can move around through space effectively. It's given a maneuver rating but from an A to F, A being the best, F being the worst. Now that's it for today. I've gone over some of the basic types of adventures you can have in space. I talked about the various different creatures you might encounter on a planet and various worlds you visit, and I talked a little bit about visiting a world from space. Then I started moving into talking about what the ship's statistics are. Next time, I will finish talking about these statistics, every kind of bit of information that's listed in the book about a ship. I will talk about a little bit about some of the ships, but I'll move on from that into the rest of the book afterwards. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.